Hey, thanks for stopping by the channel. I'm going to do something a little different today. There's absolutely zero Ionic code in this example. This is an example to just show you how to use Vee-Validate to create nested arrays, i.e. have objects in your form that there's multiple entries. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create this group, and the group can have multiple members, and we're going to show you how to create that and validate that using Vee-Validate. So let's get to the code. So we have a basic application here to demonstrate how to handle nested arrays with Vee-Validate. The basic idea is we have a group, the groups have members, and the members have the members have a name and an email address. We have a submit to submit the form, and then we have the ability to add additional members. So I've laid out all this code so we can focus specifically on the Vee-Validate functionality. And the first thing we need to do is we need to, for those who aren't familiar, I'm using Code Sandbox. And in Code Sandbox, you can add dependencies by just entering the information in the add dependency box. So we don't have to deal with all of the traditional npm install and modifying the package JSON. For those of you who are here because you're using Ionic content, the first part of this is going to focus specifically on how to utilize Vee-Validate and support nested arrays. Working just in plain Vue, and then the next step will be showing you how to do it with Ionic. There are a couple of changes you need to make to account for the Ionic web components. Please make sure you're using version 4 of Vee-Validate. I'm fumbling around to get past the beta. There is an actual release. I have a previous video that I did based on the beta, which I'll include the link in the bio that you can check out, but this is on the latest release. This is a problem that not a problem, it's something that I think you'd like to use in your applications. I see many use cases for this type of support, and the ability to actually validate the fields as you're entering them, I think, is also critical. All right, so let's get to the code. Oh, I forgot one thing. Before we hop off to the code, we need to make sure we add the rules, because we're going to use the min rule, the required rule, and the email rule to check our fields. And it's cool that they have this package that handles all that for you. Now let's try to get over to the code. Okay, here we are. I collapsed everything into, like I said, and to just make this simple as possible. So we're in our app view, and here in the app view is where we're gonna start to modify this basic form to start to utilize the functionality that we get with Vee-Validate. We're not going to use the options API approach, so we need to start by adding our setup. As you know, with the new format, you put everything inside of setup. We're going to use the onMounted. That's where we're going to kind of configure Vee-Validate initially. We're going to do everything inside of onMounted, and that'll get fired up when we first start. We need to make sure we add the import for Vue. Specifically, we'll wrap the whole thing with define component, and then we need the import for onMounted for the onMounted lifecycle function. Okay, now we have that set. Also, although I like the benefits of Code Sandbox, every now and then you got to reload everything because it just needs to get refreshed the way the hot module reloader works. So every now and then I'm going to be hopping back and forth from coding to actually hitting refresh. All right, let's add the rest of the imports that we're going to need to get this thing going. Specifically the Vee-Validate. I'm going to say that wrong the whole video, but you know what I mean. So first we need to import the configure. It's a function that we're going to call to configure the component. And we're going to, as I said, we're going to configure everything in the startup inside of onMounted. And the main configuration we're going to focus on right now is when we want to validate, and we want to validate on input. So basically, as you're changing the item and you enter it in the input field, that's when we want to validate. So this way we can get the error messages. This is the hot reload errors that I was talking about before. So you'll see me every now and then just kind of reload to kind of get things back set. So now we have our initial configuration done, and let's move on to the next step. And the next step is to actually use the Vee-Validate components of form and field, and they basically do exactly what you say. We're going to wrap our whole form using their form directive, and then we're going to assign all of our input items using their field directive. So let's go make these changes right now. So let's start at the top and add form. Okay, and then on form, there's some slots that we need to account for, specifically errors and values, and they basically do exactly what they sound like they do. Errors will give us back errors that are associated with the form, and values will give us back values that are associated with the form. And we're going to display them down at the bottom, so that as we're manipulating the input fields, you can see changes to errors and the values being added. And then last but not least, there's a submit. The V form kind of hooks into there and will only let me submit if the form is valid. And the handleSubmit is going to be our function that will get called if the form is valid. Let's put some debugging information here at the bottom here. We're going to add a VeeValidate section, and we're going to dump the errors and the values here so that you can see what's going on as we're working through the application. I wrap them in a pre so that they get a nice format, and well, we can go from there. The next thing is to start to assign the fields. So for each one of our inputs, we're going to use the field directive, and then in that we're going to use the as. There's other ways to do it. This way works for what we're trying to accomplish, and then it also is going to work for what I'm doing in the second part of the video. For the Ionic folks who are here early, but this is how we're going to get this Vee-Validate to work with Ionic. We're just going to use the as for the Ionic components. So we assign the as, basically telling this field to act like an input field to all of the objects. And now let's recompile and see what we get. Also in the next part, I'll be porting this project, we're basically moving this project into regular Visual Studio Code. Okay, we got some errors. What's it complaining about? Vee-Validate rules. It looks like the problem is I didn't import the actual components. So let's, actually I imported the components, I didn't add them to the components section so that it was aware of them in the template. So let's add the form and the field to the component section. Let's see if that fixes some of the errors. It looks better. And what else is, yeah, let's add our handle function. So this is the function that will be called on submit. And when we get called, the values parameter should have the values from the form, which is exactly what we want. Let's return our handleSubmit function so that it can be accessed inside the template. We don't need those down there. I don't know why I typed that. We have our handleSubmit. handleSubmit is complaining because it actually needs something inside the fat arrow. So let's just do a console log for now, so we can kind of see what's happening as we're working through the application. Let's set this function up properly. Everything looks good. Let's refresh. And my error was actually because I did not have the info wrapped inside the form. Now you can start to see we're getting some of the data that we're looking for. All right, let's transition over to the next big step here for the application. Now that we have our forms and Vee-Validate and everything's working, we should now be able to move on to the validation rules. So Vee-Validate gives us a min and an email check, and so we're just going to import those. And then we use this define rule function. So down inside of our onMounted, after we do configuration, we can define these rules so that they can then be used inside the template. And so that's what we're going to do here. Let's just kind of paste those in so we don't have to type them all. So we're defining a rule for required, for min, and for email. And then now let's move up to the template. And up in the template, we're going to put all of these rules to good use. Okay, let's start with the first of all, let's fix the type and set the type to email so that that works properly. Then you can see on the end we add the required and the email type. And then for the name, we're going to add required, and we're going to set the minimum size of that field, so it has to be at least 8 characters. And then we're going to move that rule, and we're going to use the exact same rule on the group name, just to keep it simple. We're just going to say it's got to be at least 8 characters. Okay, now let's see. After that, scroll, everything looks like it's the way it's supposed to be. We have our min max set, we have required, so now we can start to submit and see some of the errors appear. As you can see, it's basically telling us that the name is invalid, everything's not right because we haven't entered anything in the fields. So let's start to put some text in and see what we get. So we've entered our email, so everything's fine. Now it's saying the group name's not valid. So now if we enter a valid group name, what is going on? our email wasn't valid because we didn't have the little ampersand, not ampersand, but that little sign in. So let's put our group name in. So our group name's fine. We can't submit because our email's still not valid. Let's go in and change our email and make it valid. The error goes away. We can submit, but let's get it out of the console because that's where it's dumping it, and let's move it up to a, let's actually add an alert in here so we can actually see the information without trying to squint down in the console. Let's try this again. Put some data in there. It's not going to show. Let's switch it to it. Let's stringify the JSON so that it appears properly, and let's format it so that it will appear properly in the alert. Let's try this again. Let's put a group name, email. The group name's not long enough. Let's add some more characters on the end of this group name and submit. Everything looks good. Submit, and it's what we want to see. All right. Now, so we have our validation and everything's working the way it's supposed to be. Let's fix our email type so we get the right size so our fields look great. All right, so we've gone through the process of demonstrating how Vee-Validate can validate a form. But what we're really here to do is to try to support these nested arrays. So to support the nested arrays, the idea is that you're adding multiple members to a group. And so the first thing you got to do is have a way to add the members. So we're going to create this function called add members. And what add members is going to do is going to add additional members to the list. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to take the values object that is provided to us by Vee-Validate, and we are basically just going to push new blank member entries onto the members object. The members property of the values object. We need to check to make sure there's something there because the first time it's going to be empty. So the first time we're going to assign values members to an empty array, and then we're just going to concatenate an empty object onto the end. For every new object, we're just going to push an empty object, and that empty object or what will appear as the two empty fields of name and email. So that's all add members does. So let's make sure down at the bottom we return to add members so we have access to it in a template. And then we have our button here. Let's add a click action on our button. Oh, we got an error. What's the error about? All right, everything looks good on the error. So what we're doing now is, as I said, every time we add a member, we want to create an additional set of fields. And so to do that, we need a loop. And so we're going to loop through the we're going to loop through the menus property on the values object to give us a list of items. And then we really just need the index from it. So as you can see, we're going to do the in values members. We need to set the key, which will be the index of it, the array index. And then let's wrap these two fields in this div. Let's put another div down here in the bottom. Div. Okay, that matches that. It's formatted, everything's looking okay. But the next step is, let's refresh. All right, what's going on here? It should be values, I believe. Let me check and make sure. Yes, values. So that fixes that error. Let's refresh, see what we get. All right, so as expected, the first time through, it should be empty because there's no members. So now let's add the click event onto the button so that we can actually start to add some members to the members property on our values. All right, doesn't like add. All right, values. So remember, we need to pass the values object in because that's what we're going to modify. All right, so everything's compiled. No, it didn't. It doesn't have add. What did I do? That's right. No, that looks good. Okay. Oh, I think it's supposed to be add member. Let's check. Yeah, the function's called add member. So let's change this to add member. Let's change the function returning to add member. And let's kind of refresh and try again and see what we get. Everything else looks good. So the next step is that clearly, since we're going to have multiple member entries, we need to make sure that we name them appropriately so that we can tell which one is which. And of course, it's an array. And so we're going to use a kind of an array dot format to keep track of them. So we have the index from above, and we can use string interpolation to get the index from the index variable and create this members array structure and then get the actual property we want, which is name. And so that's how we name each one of the fields. And so we'll go down and we'll name the email field the exact same way. So now we'll have an array of members, each with their own email and name field. And so let's see if we can kind of show how that works. So you see how I added the member, and you can see down on the bottom the VeeValidate errors indicated that we didn't have a an email name. Now it's saying the group name isn't right. Let's put the group name is valid. And as you can see, we're getting the expected behavior. We have this array object that has the fields in it that we want. Let's add another member. And you can see it incremented it, and it added a second array element. So it's basically doing what we expected it to do right now. And you can even see how we're getting the error messages based on the specific entry, index entry. And so that's all, it just all is coming together pretty nicely. Once you kind of figure out how to do it, it's pretty cool what it accomplishes for you. And as I said, I think it's a feature that you'll find yourself using pretty often. So now we're able to add items and we're able to get the errors on the specific items. I think the logical next step is to figure out like what happens if I put an item in the array and I don't want it to be there anymore, i.e. how do I delete items that are from the array? So let's start by putting a button, and basically the approach is going to be similar to how we added. We basically just took an array object and pushed a new element on the end. And to remove an object, we're just going to get the array object. We're going to get the index that's passed to us, and we're going to remove the object from the array and pass the array back to VeeValidate. And everything else will just kind of fall in place. So let's add this button. We're putting it inside the loop so that clearly there's one button for each entry. We're going to call this function a remove member. And for this time, we're going to need more than just the index. We're going to also need to get the values object from VeeValidate and the index of the element that's associated with the object that we want to delete. And so we're going to pass those into our new function. Let's put a little style in there so that button isn't so big. I don't know why I'm getting all caught up in the style, but I think I discovered this zoom thing and I like the way it works, so I use it often. So now we have our button in place. Let's refresh. We get a little button that appears underneath the member entry as it's added. And clicking that guy should remove the entry from the values, specifically from the values.member object. Sorry, values.member property. Now I'm really getting crazy because I don't like how close that button is. Let's put a little margin on that button to kind of give it some room. Refresh and see how we get. Yeah, it looks a little bit better. Okay, so now you can see every time I add a member, we get a new button to remove the member. And there's the function. Okay, let's see. How come my function isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing? Let's jump around here because I didn't add it yet. So let's actually add the function. So let's put a little some comments in here so you guys can follow along. Because as I said, I'll include all the source code with the project. You can take a look yourself. And so we have our function that adds a new member to the form, and then we have our function that gets the actual values from the form. That's what we do inside of our handleSubmit. And then clearly we need to add our own function to actually add members to the form. I can't type validation, ION. Okay, so we did our good deed for today and said we documented our code. So now let's add the remove member. So we'll copy the add member. The remove member, we're going to use our simple array function, which, like I said before, we're going to filter the values.member array and remove the item that doesn't belong there. Okay, so let's get going on that. Okay, let's start with our array manipulation here. We're going to do a values.members.filter, and the idea is just filter out all of the objects that are in the array where the condition is true. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, let's get this return value set properly. Everything, yeah, members, and just making sure I'm passing the right parameter. I'm passing the index in and the values. So let's set this properly. Let's not say index, let's say I. Oh, I don't think that's okay. Let's do this. I does not equal index. So the I does not equal the index of what we're getting passed in for the specific element. Oh, I don't want my I there. My I belongs down here on remove member. Thank you. That's a little bit better. All right, we have our filters function working properly. Now let's make sure we, no, we don't need to return anything. We need to set the values.members to the new array that we just created. And I think that should be that. I won't say that it's as simple as that because it took a while to get this far, but that's what we want to do. Let's leave a nice comment on here saying what this function is doing. So it removes member entry based on the index provided. Okay, let's give it a try. So we add a new member. Let's put Aaron.mail, and then for mail, Aaron.mail. Let's refresh this. Get rid of these errors. Make sure everything's compiled. Let's try again. Okay, let's create our group name. Let's add a member. Let's add an email. And let's try to add it. Why is it failing? It's failing because my name is not long enough. So let's add a few more characters on there. So we get our errors gone. So now our error's gone. Now let's add another member. And you can see that. Now it's complaining that the second member off by one error, off by one because it's a zero-based index, and so it's one. And then now you can see we just remove it and everybody's happy again. Now let's add the member again. Add a name. Let's make sure the name is 8 characters so that we don't have to deal with that error. We'll just copy the same old email address. There's no validation there. And we'll change it to 2. And so you see we have our 2 elements to our members, and when I submit, you can see we're getting all the values just as we expected to get them. So like I said, I just wanted to quickly go through that. Also, you can see I can remove and everything's all cleared out. But as I said, as I just kind of clicked through these last set of examples here, the basic idea was to show you how to create this array of objects that live inside of a form and to be able to use Vee-Validate to validate them appropriately. I think, as I said, this is pretty cool. For all the Ionic folks who are watching me here, I'll do another short video, or I'll provide the code to show you how to just make some minor modifications to get this to work properly with Ionic. But I really wanted to try to do something that was Ionic free to get folks who just wanted to know how to do it in Vue to know how it works. So take care. I hope you enjoyed this. Please make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye now. Hey, I decided to add the Ion content onto the end of this project. So here's how you get your nested objects to work in Ionic Framework using Vee-Validate. And by the way, these are my videos and ebooks that are posted on Gumroad. Please check them out. So I can leave you hanging. So we're going to convert this. We're specifically focused on the key differences to get it to work with Ionic. So first, let's hop in here and let's see if we go to main, we're going straight to app. So in app, we need to wrap this whole guy in our Ion app. So let's start there. And let's go down here and wrap this whole, I realized the whole thing was a form Ion /Ion app. So that's the first start. And also before we get too carried away, let's get all the styles loaded up in here. Okay, so we got all of the styles that need to get loaded. And then you also need to make sure that you load the the Ionic Vue component. So we need to load Ionic Vue. So let's get that over here. It should start complaining about dependencies that need to get loaded, but it's pretty cool. Code Sandbox will go out and find them and bring them all in for us. And then the next thing is we need to actually add this onto the end. We probably want to do it before we mount, so let's switch that around to this order. Ionic Vue. Let's see if it can figure all this stuff out, or if I'm going to have to go in here and add some things. Let's see. Let's already start. We know we're going to have to start adding Ionic endpoints. So I don't know why it needs view router, even though we're not using the router, but let's put it in. And let's start with the Ionic components, because we know we're going to need these guys. So we're going to have to import. And we already know we have Ion app. I'm going to borrow something that I saw from the other project I was looking at, where they push all the components down to the bottom so they get out of your way. So let's try that. And we'll start with Ion app. And why is it not happy there? That's right. Oh, because I already have components up there. We're going to move all the components down to the bottom here. And remove this components up from the top so that our components don't get in the way. Could not find module and path theme variables that, this has turned out to be a bigger hassle than I thought. And it is called theme. And then inside of that folder, it has a file called rename variable.css. Let's get back here. Let's just drag it into theme, and then we're going to copy the theme. Okay, so we got the theme moved over. Okay, now the next thing is, we don't want that. We got the theme moved over. Now the next thing is we are in our app view, and we are in an Ion app, and Ion apps like to be wrapped in pages. Ion page, and then Ion content. And then let's get down to the bottom, and we're starting to get a little bit closer. So let's go down here at Ion page, Ion content, Ion button. So now we're going to use that. We're also going to use an Ion input. And I think we use an Ion label. Okay, so now let's go add all these guys up top here to our inputs. Where's that? Here we go. All right, it's starting to look a little bit better. And then let's go up and start. And so let's do so we got our padding. Let's start working our buttons. Where are my buttons? Name members, add members. So let's get this Ion button going. Ion button, Ion button. Where do they go? Ion button. So that's our buttons. And so now we're going to start to change our fields. So before it was input, and we're going to change this to Ion input. And then we're going to change our group name up here to Ion input. T. And so we get that, but it also really likes to be in an Ion item. So let's see if we can make it happy and give it that. So let's try. See, so now it's kind of happy. It's got a little underline thing that goes in Ion item. Let's start to wrap. Let's change this to our Ion label. So we have our nice little field like it wants. Let's go down. Let's change all these labels to Ion labels. Label, Ion label. We'll leave this as a div, but what we want to do is we want to wrap these fields. So this needs to be in, let's copy it from up here. This needs to be an Ion input. I already changed that one. So Ion input, Ion input, Ion input. That's a button, that's an Ion button, that's an Ion button. Let's make sure we add our Ion. We already have our Ion input. We have our Ion label. So did Ion button, Ion item is what I did not add. Ion item, add it down to the bottom here. What is that complaining about? Ion input component has been registered but is not used. I don't know why it does that. So let's see now what happens. Huh? Okay, what's the right problem? Okay, let's see now when I add a member. So I'm getting my field. It doesn't look quite like an Ionic button. Let's see what's going on. It's not a Ion item, Ion input. Where is it? It's up here, my template. So let's look what's going on. It's not wrapped in an item, so we don't get that look and feel that you expect from Ionic. So let's wrap it in an item. Now let's wrap this next one. An item Ion button that ends it. Oh, I need another one up here. Okay, now let's try to add a member so we get our nice little look. We can remove our member. We have our Ion look and feel. It's working as let's check. Ionic test version, add member, Aaron Saunders, clear innovative. So it's capturing the data, which is what we're always worried about. Are we getting the input field? So we're getting our Aaron, our first name, our last name. Let's add another member. Aaron K. Saunders. S-A-U-N-D-E-R. And Aaron K. at mail.com. Add member. Let's remove this new member. We're getting the information that we wanted. Oh, there's one other thing that I wanted to add that we didn't do before. It's the error checking. And so the easy way to do it is, I believe that there's a an error object that we get here. Where does it go? Let's go down into Vee-Validate. I believe we get an error message. And let's export that error message. And then you can just come up here and so let's go up underneath our group name. Remember, we got to do it outside the item, and we should be able to do error message. And I think it is name. I think, yeah, it's name equals, and we should just be able to say group name. And so group name is not valid. So that's how you get that. Clearly, you can clean up the style and do a bunch of other things to kind of change that. I mean, let's just do something quick. Go down here, and we're going to say the object error message font size smaller, font color red. Actually, I think it's just color. And so if I submit, error message. Oh, let's just, what? Error message. That's a selector. Or maybe I can't do a selector on an element like that. Looks like I can't. So let's just do this. Dot error. Sometimes you get too fancy and you're just making it worse. And so we're just going to do a dot error. Then we'll go up here on nested and we'll just say class. Well, make sure I put that period in front of my class. I did. Let's submit. All right, there we go. It's a little bit better. Probably need a little. Am I getting crazy? You guys get the idea. You can style a little bit more. But the more interesting thing is how do we handle the error message on these nested objects? So let's just drop an error message in there and see what we get. So where am I? Here we go. So if I come down to one of these fields, and let's go here, error message. So you've got to take the same group name. So you need to interpret the group name. So we pretty much need to just lift this whole thing, I believe, and drop it in. And let's see what we get. So add a member, submit. See, and so you're saying, all right, it's the name is not valid, but we don't like this member's name .0 thing. So let me get the email one on there. This is down here under email. Submit, add member, submit. And so both of these guys are complaining, oh, that's definitely not good. So first, let's see if we can fix that. Let's just first put a div around this whole thing. Let's go down to the end before my remove button. Let's put another div. Add members, submit. All right, so we addressed that first error. Let's also do a style origin 12. And let's add a member. Add a member. So we get a little bit of space between the members. And then that's okay. And then this last thing for my buttons down here, because this is in a separate div. Let's just match the style so we get it's the same kind of thing. Let's just do a style. Padding top 12. Okay, so let's add a member. Whoa, that's not right. That gets a little bit better. So you get these errors. So you can see we're getting the error that we expect to see, but we got to address this .0 name thing. So one hack that you can, well, it's not really a hack, is you can add another function here that can calculate the error and strip that stuff off. I think what we can do here is, actually let's do it in line, save some time, not do it in a function. Let's just go up and you see where we have error message, right? So let's leave the class because we want that. Let's take that off. we're just going to create a span. And in this span, we are going to display the error message. And so you can tell from looking below that, so if I do a submit, the error message is, the key is the name, right? So what we can say is we can go in here and we can, let's just first start with errors, right? Let's add a member so we can see it. So you first start with errors, and then we can say, so we know that one is group name, right? Group. Right, so if I submit, I'm getting, and if I add a member, see, so that's how I get the group name. So what we want is we need this name right here. So if I take this name and go like this, and do an add member and then a submit, you see we're getting the, why is that there? Member name is not value. Where is that? Yeah, member name is not valid, but we're not getting the email. What is going on here? Oh, errors dot member name dot email dot submit. Hold on, let me see. This, hold on. There we go. So if I add a member, oh, property of errors not, let's go. You need to make sure we have, actually, let's go like this first. Add a member, submit. Members.email is not valid. Members.name is not valid. Right, so I now have the email error message, but I don't need this stuff, right? So a quick hack is to just split it. So I can just say split on period, and then just show me the second element. So if I add a member and submit, I get just the email is not valid. And so we can use that same approach up here for the member name also. As I said, there's probably cleaner ways to do it, but for what we're trying to accomplish here, which is to, let me get this out of the way. But for what we're trying to accomplish here, this shows you. I can add a member, submit, and I'm getting, oh, I put email up there. It's not email members, it's the name. We get the name again, drop the name in here, and then we get the error associated with the name. And then you can also see how we're getting them real time on the input. So group name's not valid. Now it is. Add a member. That name is not valid. It's not long enough. Now it is. This email is not valid. Now it is. Add another member. Submit. It's just telling us these two are invalid because it's mapping it to the second element. So that's what I wanted to cover. Quickly moved over to Ionic. You see that it is working with the Ionic input objects, and so you get the look and feel of an Ionic input object. And I think that is where I'm going to leave it for here. Thanks. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.